Hey guys. Tonight we're going to trace a quiet little tremor that started in a dusty church loft and ended up shaking the very foundations of one of the world's most celebrated institutions, French cuisine. You find yourself in 18th century France, a place of powdered wigs and grand chateaux, but our story begins far from the glittering halls of Versailles. We start with a bored choirmaster, a forgotten book of songs, and a secret hiding in plain sight. From this simple, almost comical discovery, a chain reaction will unfold, one that will eventually dictate how chefs across France, and then the world, think about flavor, texture, and the very art of cooking. You probably wouldn't expect this outcome, that the sophisticated, sauce-draped world of haute cuisine owes a profound debt to a moldy songbook and a man who was just trained to kill an afternoon. It's a strange and winding road, paved with coincidence and curiosity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to see where and when you're listening from, so drop your city and local time in the comments below. It's always a treat to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes. The air around you is thick with the scent of old stone, beeswax, and something else, the dry, sweet smell of decaying paper. You are in Dijon, a respectable provincial capital in the heart of Burgundy. It's the mid-1700s, and while Paris is a whirlwind of Enlightenment philosophy and aristocratic drama, life here moves at a much slower, more deliberate pace. You find yourself in the hushed quiet of a cathedral loft, shafts of dusty sunlight cutting through the gloom from a high, round window. Below, the cavernous space of the church is empty, echoing with a profound silence that feels ancient. You're watching a man named Guillaume, the cathedral's choirmaster. He's not a man driven by grand passions or divine inspiration, at least not anymore. He is, to put it plainly, spectacularly bored. For 2 decades, he has drilled the same choir boys on the same rotation of Baroque motets and cantatas. The music, once beautiful, has become a kind of elegant wallpaper to his life, a sound he barely registers. He feels less like a conductor and more like a human metronome, winding up the choir each Sunday only for them to play the same tune again. It's a comfortable life, but one that has become suffocatingly predictable. Think of it as having the same playlist on repeat for 20 years. You'd probably be looking for something, anything, new to listen to as well. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, seeking refuge from the oppressive sameness of his routine, Guillaume has ascended to the cathedral's storage loft. This is less of a library and more of a forgotten attic, a place where broken organ pipes, retired vestments, and generations of discarded hymnals go to gracefully molder into dust. He's not looking for anything specific. He's simply rummaging, hoping for a distraction. He pries open a large iron-strapped wooden chest that hasn't seen the light of day since the reign of Louis XIV. A puff of stale air, a small universe of dancing dust motes, and there, at the bottom, lies the object that will unknowingly change everything. It's a book, but it's unlike any of the printed hymnals he's used to. This one is bound in dark, cracked leather, the cover bare of any title. You watch as he lifts it, feeling the surprising weight, the brittle stiffness of the binding. The pages aren't paper, but vellum, animal skin, yellowed with age to the color of old ivory. As he opens it, a faint, earthy scent rises to meet him. The musical notation is strange, not the familiar round notes of his era, but older, square-shaped neumes from the Renaissance. The script is hand-drawn, a work of immense patience and artistry, though the ink has faded to a ghostly brown. This is a psalter, a book of songs set to music from a time long past. Here's a little historical fact for you. While we think of Paris as the heart of France, Dijon was once the magnificent capital of the Dukes of Burgundy, a powerhouse state that rivaled the Kingdom of France itself in the 15th century. By the 1700s, its glory days were long gone, but the city retained a quiet pride and was filled with relics of its richer, more powerful past. This songbook was one such relic. Historians still argue whether these intricate manuscripts were created in local Burgundian monasteries or if they were cultural imports, brought back from the Italian campaigns by wealthy dukes, eager to show off their sophisticated tastes. Guillaume, our core master, isn't thinking about any of this. He's just captivated by the sheer age of the thing. He tries to hum one of the melodies, but the tonal system is alien to him, modal and melancholic, completely at odds with the triumphant, orderly music of his own time. It's beautiful, in a haunting, unfamiliar way. A quirky tidbit about church musicians of this period is that they were often incredibly pragmatic. While we imagine them as artists, many saw their role as a functional craft. If a piece of music was too old-fashioned or didn't fit the current liturgical style, it was simply unusable, like having a perfectly good chariot in an age of carriages. He realizes almost immediately that he can't use this music. The choir boys would butcher it, and the congregation would find it dreary and strange. His brief spark of excitement begins to fade, replaced by a familiar sense of mild disappointment. It's just another beautiful but useless thing, destined to return to its dusty tomb. But as he stands there, holding this piece of history, an idea begins to form. He can't use the music, no, but he knows someone who might appreciate the book itself. Someone who loves old things not for their utility, but for their strangeness, for the stories they tell. This is the connecting thread. The music itself is a dead end for Guillaume, its original purpose lost to time. Yet, the physical object, the ink, the vellum, the curious scribbles in the margins he barely glances at, is about to find a new purpose. His thoughts drift to his friend, a local printer named Antoine, a man with a peculiar obsession for antique fonts and forgotten scripts. Perhaps Antoine would find some joy in it. With a shrug, Guillaume decides it's better than leaving it in the chest. He tucks the heavy book under his arm and makes his way down the winding stone staircase, leaving the silent loft behind, entirely unaware that he is carrying the catalyst for a culinary revolution. You follow Guillaume as he steps out from the cathedral's cool shadow into the warm afternoon sun of Dijon. The street is a gentle chaos of sounds and smells. You can hear the rhythmic clatter of wooden clogs on cobblestones, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and the murmur of conversation spilling from the open windows of timber-framed houses. The air carries a mixture of baking bread from a nearby boulangerie and the sharp, earthy scent of the horses pulling carts along the lane. Guillaume navigates the familiar path with the easy gait of a man who has walked it 1,000 times, the heavy psalter tucked securely under his arm, its secret still sleeping soundly between its vellum pages. His destination is a narrow, unassuming storefront, distinguished only by a simple wooden sign bearing the name A. Belloc, imprimeur. This is the workshop of his friend, Antoine Belloc. As you step inside behind Guillaume, the world changes instantly. The sacred, echoing silence of the cathedral is replaced by the industrious, metallic heartbeat of the Enlightenment. A large wooden screw press, a marvel of mechanical ingenuity, dominates the room. The air is thick with the sharp, chemical tang of ink, the scent of damp paper, and the faint, metallic smell of lead type. Stacks of printed sheets stand in neat piles, and wooden trays filled with thousands of tiny, reversed letters line the walls. Antoine is the perfect opposite of Guillaume. Where the choir master is a man steeped in ancient tradition, Antoine is a man of the new age. A craftsman, an intellectual, and an obsessive hobbyist. He's of average height, with ink stains permanently embedded in the creases of his fingers, and he peers at the world through a pair of spectacles perched on the end of his nose. He greets Guillaume with a warm but distracted smile, his mind clearly still on the page of philosophical treatise he was setting. Antoine gets more excited about a perfectly formed serif on a letter S than he does about the latest court gossip from Paris. He's a font geek, born 2 centuries too early. Guillaume presents the book with a self-deprecating shrug.
I found this old thing in the loft,
he says. The music is useless to me, but I thought of your collection. He can't help but smile, knowing his friend's peculiar passion. Antoine takes the book reverently, his initial politeness quickly turning into genuine fascination. But as you watch him, you notice he doesn't even look at the musical notes. His skilled printer's eye is devouring the technical details. He runs a gentle finger over the hand-drawn script. Magnificent, he mutters, his voice low with admiration. Look at the consistency of the lettering. This scribe had a masterful hand. And the vellum. It's been preserved beautifully. He holds a page up to the light, examining its texture and translucence. This brings us to a key historical fact of the era. Antoine's print shop, humble as it is, represents the engine of the Enlightenment. The printing press had, of course, been around for centuries, but the 1700s saw an unprecedented explosion of printed material. Pamphlets, essays, and books spread radical new ideas about science, politics, and human rights across Europe with astonishing speed, fueling revolutions in both America and, soon, France itself. Antoine, setting type for local thinkers, is a small but vital part of this vast, decentralized network of knowledge. He turns another page, and another, his admiration growing. He points out a detail to Guillaume. See how the ink has faded to brown? That's an iron gall ink. The acid has bitten into the vellum ever so slightly. Modern inks are faster, cheaper, but they don't have this soul. It's the classic 18th century complaint, the equivalent of a modern audiophile insisting on the warm crackle of vinyl over a digital file. Guillaume just nods along.
Well, I'm glad it's found a good home, he says. My choir boys would have probably used it to prop open a window.
Then, Antoine's trained eye catches something unusual. In the margins of one of the later pages, below a somber Latin song, is a flurry of additional writing. This is marginalia, a delightful and quirky feature of old manuscripts. Scribes and readers would often leave notes, comments, or even bizarre doodles in the empty spaces on a page. Some of the most famous medieval manuscripts feature drawings of knights battling snails or rabbits enacting vengeance on hunters. They were the means and comment sections of their day. Historians still argue whether these marginal notes were idle doodles to combat boredom, coded messages, or simply practical notes and study aids for the reader. The writing in this book is different from the neat, formal script of the main text. It's messier, more hurried, written in a different, darker ink, and, most importantly, it's not in Latin. Antoine leans closer, his spectacles slipping further down his nose. The script is a cramped, spidery hand, and the language is an archaic dialect of French, full of unfamiliar spellings and abbreviations. It's clearly a later edition, scribbled in by a long-dead owner of the book, someone who saw a blank space and decided to use it. This is the connecting thread, the moment the path of our story pivots. The magnificent Renaissance music, the very reason the book was created and preserved, is ignored. The core master's boredom, the printer's peculiar hobby, all of it has led to this specific moment. Antoine's curiosity, the driving force of his intellectual world, is no longer focused on the elegant professional script of the original scribe. It has been captured by this anonymous, almost illegible scrawl. It's a puzzle, a ghost's whisper on a page. He pulls a magnifying glass from a cluttered drawer, the same kind he uses to inspect the quality of his lead type. He squints, tilting the vellum page to catch the light from the window, and begins the painstaking process of deciphering the faded, spidery words. He doesn't know it yet, but he is no longer reading a songbook. He is about to read a recipe. You are still inside the print shop, wrapped in the comforting sense of lead and ink. The rhythmic clanking of the press has fallen silent. There is only the quiet scratching of Antoine's quill as he transcribes the faint, spidery writing from the songbook's margin onto a fresh sheet of paper. Guillaume, our core master, has pulled up a stool, his boredom momentarily forgotten, replaced by a quiet curiosity about his friend's strange archaeological dig. You lean in, as if peering over Antoine's shoulder, watching him work. It's a slow, painstaking process. The handwriting is atrocious. Antoine mutters that the original author must have been a physician, and the archaic French is a puzzle of its own. He works with the intense focus of a code breaker. He squints through his magnifying glass, muttering words under his breath. Crimes de Seneve, he whispers. Mustard seeds. That makes sense. In Dijon. He continues, his quill scratching. Vieux vinaigre de vin. Old wine vinegar. Another common ingredient. But then his brow furrows. He leans closer, adjusting his spectacles. Verjuice, he says, with a note of surprise. Verjuice, the sour, acidic juice pressed from unripe grapes. It wasn't unheard of, but it was becoming less common in their modern era of cooking. The list goes on. a mix of familiar and faintly strange items. He deciphers a mention of honey, a specific type of salt, and a cluster of herbs whose names are so anciently spelled he can only guess at what they are. This brings us to a key historical fact. Dijon's relationship with mustard is ancient and deep. The city was officially granted the exclusive right to mustard production in France back in the 17th century, and its guild of moutardiers had been around since the 1300s. By Antoine's time, Dijon mustard was already a famous, protected brand, known for its sharp, clean heat. So, for a man in 18th century Dijon to find a recipe for mustard is, on its face, as unremarkable as finding a recipe for barbecue sauce in modern-day Kansas City. It's their thing. However, the nature of old recipes adds a layer of complexity. As you watch Antoine transcribe, you notice the instructions are wonderfully, maddeningly vague. There are no precise measurements like milliliters or grams. A quirky but common feature of recipes from this time was their reliance on intuition. The text instructs the maker to use a thumb's worth of honey and to grind the seeds until they are
as fine as river salt. It calls for enough verjuice to make a pleasing paste.
This isn't a chemical formula. It's a conversation with the cook, assuming a level of knowledge that has been lost for centuries. It's more like a magic potion than a modern recipe, relying on feel and experience. Guillaume chuckles. Well, I'm glad it's not a recipe for turning lead into gold, he says. We'd both be out of a job. As Antoine continues to decipher the method, he realizes this recipe is fundamentally different from the standard Dijon mustard being produced by the official manufacturers just a few streets away. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of verjuice instead of plain vinegar was the original secret to Burgundian mustard's fame, a secret that had been simplified over the years for mass production. This recipe seems to confirm that older, more complex tradition. It calls for using both aged wine vinegar for its sharp bite and verjuice for a greener, more fruity acidity. Furthermore, it describes a two-stage grinding process and a long period of maceration in a cool cellar, allowing the flavors to meld and deepen in a way that modern, faster methods simply didn't allow. This wasn't just mustard. This was alchemical mustard. It promised not just heat, but a symphony of flavors. A sharp, acidic attack, followed by an earthy, complex warmth, and finishing with a hint of sweetness from the honey. It was a condiment designed not just to be hot, but to be interesting. Antoine finishes his transcription and leans back, looking at the 2 pages side by side, the ancient, ghost-like scrawl in the book, and his own neat, modern handwriting on the paper. The puzzle of the text was solved. But as you watch him, you see a shift in his eyes. The intellectual curiosity of the printer, the historian, the man who loves old fonts, is fading. It's being replaced by something else, something more primal and compelling. It's the curiosity of the gourmand. Antoine was a man who appreciated good food, and Dijon, for all its provincial quiet, was a city that took eating and drinking very seriously. This is the connecting thread. The journey of the book is over, but the journey of the recipe is just beginning. Antoine holds in his hands a secret from the past, a forgotten flavor from the age of the great dukes of Burgundy. The question that now hangs in the ink-scented air of the print shop is no longer, what does this ancient text say? It has become, what would this ancient mustard taste like? He looks up from the vellum page, his gaze distant, the hum of the city outside fading into the background. An idea, far more audacious than simply collecting old books, is taking root in his practical, methodical mind. He was a printer, a man of letters. But as he looks at the list of ingredients, he thinks, maybe, just maybe, he could also be a mustard maker. The idea once sparked refuses to be extinguished. It lingers in Antoine's mind as he goes about his work, the ghost of a forgotten flavor haunting the clatter and clang of his print shop. He is a man of paper and ink, of logic and mechanics. Cooking is a messy, imprecise art, a world of instinct he knows little about. And yet, the puzzle of the recipe calls to him, no longer as a historical curiosity, but as a direct challenge. The question, what if, becomes why not? You watch as a quiet determination settles over him. He will not just decipher the past, he will resurrect it. He will make the mustard. This decision sets him on a small, personal quest through the markets of 18th century Dijon. This isn't a simple shopping trip. It's an exercise in culinary archaeology. He needs not just any mustard seeds, but the potent, dark Brassica nigra seeds mentioned in the text. He spends a morning talking to elderly farmers, finally finding one who still grows the old varietal. Sourcing the verjuice is even harder. Once a staple, it had fallen out of fashion. Historians still argue whether the decline of these sour-sweet flavors was a conscious shift in public taste, or simply a matter of economic convenience, as refined sugar from the colonies became cheaper and more available. After several inquiries, he is directed to a small winery on the outskirts of the city that still makes a little verjuice for its own use. He buys a cask, feeling a small thrill of victory. Back in his own kitchen, a warm domestic space of stone hearths and copper pots that stands in stark contrast to his industrial workshop, the experiment begins. You can smell the sharp, pungent aroma as he begins to crush the dark seeds with a heavy mortar and pestle. The recipe is his only guide, and its vagueness is a constant source of frustration for a man used to the millimeter precision of setting type. How much is a thumb's worth of honey exactly? He wishes the scribe had provided a schematic. He adds the liquids, watching the coarse powder transform into a thick, dark, unappetizing sludge. He makes a bit of a mess, splashing the paste on his apron. He is a master craftsman in his own world, but in the kitchen, he is a clumsy amateur, and the irony is not lost on him. Now for a crucial bit of historical context. In 18th century France, trades were rigorously controlled by guilds. The Dijon Guild of Moutardiers-Vinaigres, mustard and vinegar makers, held a legal monopoly on the product. For Antoine, a printer, to be concocting his own mustard was technically illicit. It was a small act of rebellion, a violation of the established economic order. He was, in essence, becoming a mustard moonshiner. This quiet, intellectual man was breaking the law, one sour grape at a time. He follows the final, most important instruction: patience. He places the crock of mustard paste in his cool, dark cellar and leaves it to macerate, to let the flavors meld and mature. For 2 long weeks, he is trying to recreate something he's never experienced, a process driven by a kind of taste memory in reverse. He isn't recalling a flavor, he's trying to summon one from history, to taste what a 16th century Burgundian might have tasted. Finally, the day arrives. You watch as he brings the crock up from the cellar. The color has deepened to a rich, earthy brown, and the scent is powerful, sharp and complex. With a slightly trembling hand, he dips a small wooden spoon into the paste and brings it to his lips. The first sensation is a wave of pure, clean acidity from the vinegar and verjuice, a sharpness that makes your eyes water slightly, but just as quickly, that recedes, and the slow building heat of the mustard seeds begins its ascent. It's not a fiery, aggressive burn. It's a deep, penetrating warmth that fills your sinuses and blossoms at the back of your palate. And just as the heat reaches its peak, you taste the finish, the faint, lingering sweetness of the honey, and a complex, almost herbal note from the mysterious ingredients in the recipe. It is, in a word, extraordinary. It is powerful enough, he thinks, to wake a man from a deep slumber, or maybe even from the grave. It's more than a condiment, it's an experience. His experiment was a success, a wild, improbable success. But now a new problem emerges. What does a printer do with a crock of the most delicious and possibly most illegal mustard in all of Dijon? He can't sell it. He has no market stall, no license. For a week, it remains his delicious secret. This is the connecting thread. The mustard cannot stay in the cellar. A creation this remarkable is meant to be shared. He decides to pot it in a few small earthenware jars. He sets one aside for Guillaume, a thank you for the book. He gives one to his neighbor, and then he thinks of another friend, a well-regarded wine merchant named Philippe, a man whose palate is respected throughout the city. He decides to give him the largest jar, simply to hear what a true connoisseur would think of it. This simple act of sharing, of seeking an expert opinion, is the fateful step that will push his creation out of the quiet safety of his kitchen and into a much larger, more unpredictable world. You find yourself now in the refined and aromatic world of Philippe, the wine merchant. His shop is a temple to the glories of Burgundy, lined with bottles of Gevrey Chambertin and Montrachet, his name synonymous with impeccable taste. When Antoine, the printer, nervously presents him with a small, unlabeled earthenware jar. Philippe is polite but inwardly skeptical. He has been given homemade concoctions before, but as a favor to his friend, he takes a small taste. You watch his expression change. The initial polite curiosity dissolves, replaced by a flash of genuine shock, then deep, contemplative concentration. He tastes it again. He, a man whose palate is his fortune, has never experienced a flavor profile like this. The power, the complexity, the elegant, lingering finish. It is not just mustard. It is a masterpiece. A few weeks later, a wave of excitement ripples through Dijon. A great personage, a duke of national importance with close ties to the royal family, is visiting the city. This is a major event. The city's finest families scramble to host him, and the pressure to impress is immense. Making dinner for this duke is the 18th century equivalent of a high-stakes televised cooking competition, where one wrong move could mean social ruin. Philippe, as the city's preeminent wine expert, is called upon to select the wines for the grand welcoming banquet. As he consults on the menu, a bold, risky idea takes root. He thinks of the small jar of brown paste sitting in his pantry. The night of the banquet arrives. You are a fly on the wall in a grand dining hall, glittering with the light of 100 beeswax candles, reflecting off silver platters and crystal glasses. The air is warm and filled with the scent of roasted meats, expensive perfumes, and the murmur of discreet, aristocratic conversation. This is the world of service à la Francais, a key culinary tradition of the era. Unlike our modern course-by-course meals, here dozens of dishes are laid out on the table at once in a stunning, opulent display. Guests are free to sample whatever they wish, using condiments to customize the flavors to their own preference. The Duke sits at the head of the table, a man in his 50s with a powdered wig and a weary, discerning expression. He is a man who has tasted everything, a man for whom novelty is the only remaining luxury. As the main course of roasted venison is served, Philippe sees his moment. With a touch of theatrical flair, as if unveiling a rare artifact, he approaches the Duke. He presents not a fancy silver sauce boat, but a humble earthenware pot. "Your Grace," he says, "a taste of old Burgundy, a forgotten flavor we have recently rediscovered." The Duke looks at the simple pot with mild disdain, but he is intrigued by Philippe's confidence. He takes out his personal diner's knife, a quirky custom of the time for high-ranking nobles, a beautiful instrument with an ivory handle, and dips the very tip into the dark paste. He brings it to his lips. You see it happen in an instant. The weariness in his eyes vanishes. A single, perfectly plucked eyebrow shoots up. There is a moment of stillness as his mind processes the cascade of flavors. The sharp, acidic bite, the profound, blooming heat, the sweet, herbal finish. He takes another, larger taste. The table's conversation fades as he puts down his knife and stares at the pot. "What is this?" he demands, his voice cutting through the room's murmur. He isn't just impressed, he is utterly captivated. Historians still argue whether the Duke's later obsession with the mustard was due to a genuinely sophisticated palate or if he was simply a masterful trendsetter, constantly searching for exotic novelties to distinguish himself at the intensely competitive royal court. Whatever the reason, in that moment, he sees its potential. This is not just a condiment, it's a conversation piece, a weapon in the social battles of Versailles. This is the connecting thread, the moment the mustard's fate is taken completely out of its creator's hands. The Duke doesn't just praise the mustard, he claims it. He declares, all of it. Who is the maker? Philippe, caught between his loyalty to his friend and the command of a powerful nobleman, reluctantly gives up the name. Antoine Belloc, the printer. Before the banquet is even over, a servant is dispatched. The few remaining jars Antoine has in his cellar are collected, carefully packed, and loaded onto the Duke's carriage. The next morning, as the Duke's entourage rumbles out of Dijon and onto the long road to Paris, the songbook secret is rattling along in a wooden crate, about to make its debut in the most glittering, influential, and unforgiving city in the world. The Duke's carriage rattles through the gates of Paris, a city that moves at a different rhythm from the rest of France. You leave behind the sleepy, sun-drenched streets of Dijon, and find yourself plunged into the heart of a sprawling, magnificent, and fiercely competitive metropolis. The air itself feels different, charged with ambition, wealth, and the scent of power. The Duke proceeds to his Parisian Hôtel Particulier, a private mansion that is a miniature palace in itself, and the small earthenware jars of Antoine's mustard are carefully unloaded, their humble appearance a stark contrast to the gilded opulence of their new home. The Duke is a master of social strategy. He knows that in the glittering, gossipy world of the royal court at Versailles, how something is introduced is just as important as what it is. He doesn't simply serve the mustard at a large dinner. Instead, you watch as he unveils it a few nights later, during a high-stakes game of cards with a select few of the most influential and notoriously jaded aristocrats in the kingdom. As a late-night snack of cold roasted quail is served, he produces a single small pot.
"A trifle I discovered on my travels," he says with a dismissive wave of his hand.
From the rustic heart of Burgundy, almost too provincial for our modern palates, I fear. It's a brilliant move, framing it as an exclusive, almost secret discovery. He's a modern-day influencer executing a perfect, limited edition product drop. This scene plays out against the backdrop of a key historical fact about this era. The court of King Louis XV at Versailles was a gilded cage. The king kept thousands of nobles there, their lives governed by impossibly complex rules of etiquette, ceremony, and social maneuvering. This system was designed to keep them too busy with fashion, gossip, and rivalries to have any time for plotting rebellions. In this environment, fads and trends moved with the speed of lightning. A new style of ribbon, a new way of holding a fan, or a new flavor could become an all-consuming obsession overnight, as everyone scrambled to be seen as the most fashionable, the most in the know. The first Marquis to taste the mustard reacts exactly as the Duke had. The bored indifference on his face is replaced by a jolt of pure surprise. He tries it again, his eyes widening. Soon the entire card game is forgotten. As the small pot is passed around the table, each nobleman taking a tiny, reverent sample. The flavor is a shock to their refined systems. So bold, so complex, so alive. It cuts through the richness of the quail and the dullness of their jaded taste buds. A quiet but intense demand fills the room. Where did this come from? Could they get some for their own kitchens? The Duke, of course, remains coy, which only fans the flames of their desire. This brings us to a quirky tidbit of the time: the intense culinary rivalries that existed between the great noble houses. The kitchens of these aristocrats were like competing laboratories, and their chefs were star players. To have a unique dish, a secret ingredient, or an exclusive supplier was a major status symbol. There were even stories of food spies, chefs or servants, who would attempt to steal recipes or bribe delivery men to find the source of a rival's new delicacy. The Duke's mustard was now the ultimate culinary secret weapon. The gossip travels through the gilded halls of Versailles faster than a horse-drawn carriage. Within 2 days, everyone is talking about the Duke's Burgundian fire. Historians still argue whether these lightning-fast culinary fads were genuine expressions of shifting tastes, or simply another form of conspicuous consumption, a way for the ultra-wealthy to demonstrate their power and their access to rare and wonderful things. In this case, it was likely both. The flavor was genuinely revolutionary, but its scarcity made it infinitely more desirable. This is the connecting thread. The demand has become a frenzy. The few jars the Duke brought from Dijon are empty, their contents having been distributed in tiny strategic dabs to the most important people at court. The obsession has taken hold, but the supply is gone. The aristocrats of Paris are now desperate. They don't just want to taste it at the Duke's table. They want to possess it, to serve it at their own parties, to claim it as their own discovery. The source is no longer a secret. The Duke has let it be known that it comes from a humble printer in Dijon. This information creates a critical new problem. The demand is in Paris, but the supply, and the secret to its creation, is hundreds of kilometers away. The pressure now shifts from the nobles to the people they employ, the highly paid, highly skilled chefs who run their grand kitchens. Under orders from their employers, these chefs now have a singular mission: get more of this mustard and figure out what to do with it. The scene now shifts to the nerve centers of Parisian aristocracy, the kitchens. You leave the glittering dining rooms and descend into a world of controlled chaos, copper pots, and searing heat. Here, the great chefs of Paris, men with egos as towering as their elaborate sugar sculptures, are facing a crisis. They are under immense pressure from their noble employers to procure this fabled mustard from Dijon. You can picture the confusion on Antoine's face as couriers from 3 different Parisian dukes arrive at his humble print shop in a single week, not to commission a book, but to offer him exorbitant sums for his contraband condiment. Our quiet printer is suddenly and bafflingly the most in-demand mustard maker in all of France. But getting the mustard is only the first problem. The second, more profound challenge is a culinary one. These chefs are masters of a delicate, refined style of cooking. They are experts in subtle flavors and elegant presentation. Antoine's creation, however, is a flavor bomb. It's a bowl in their china shop of a cuisine. You can imagine the first disastrous experiments. A furious chef adding a liberal spoonful to a delicate fish velouté, only to create a curdled, fiery mess that's completely inedible. They are furious that a flavor created by some provincial amateur is making a mockery of their life's work. The mustard doesn't just accompany their food, it bullies it. It shouts it down. It completely hijacks the dish. In one of these kitchens, a chef, let's call him Jean-Luc Dubois, a thoughtful and ambitious man, has a moment of revelation. He realizes they are all thinking about it backwards. They are trying to fit this powerful new flavor into their old way of cooking. What if, he thinks, they did the opposite? What if, instead of seeing the mustard as an aggressive addition, they saw it as the foundation, the central pillar around which a new kind of dish could be built? The idea is to not just serve the flavor, but to tame it, to build a structure of other flavors around it, to bring it into harmony. It's a revolutionary thought. Don't just use the mustard, manage it. This brings us to a crucial fact about the history of French food. Before this period, French sauces were often simpler, cruder affairs. Many were still based on medieval traditions, thickened with breadcrumbs and aggressively spiced to hide the taste of meats that were not always perfectly fresh. While the shift to using butter and flour roux and rich, clarified stocks was underway, it was a slow evolution. Antoine's mustard becomes the catalyst that kicks this evolution into high gear. It presented a problem that the old style of sauce making simply couldn't solve. The kitchens of Paris are now plunged into a frantic, undeclared competition, a culinary arms race. Chef Dubois begins his work. He takes the potent mustard and balances its acidic fire with the richness of heavy cream. He uses a deep, gelatinous veal stock to give it body and a savory depth. He adds a splash of white wine for a fragrant top note. He is no longer just mixing ingredients. He is engineering a flavor delivery system. In the great houses, the saucier, or sauce chef, a quirky but essential position in the kitchen hierarchy, suddenly becomes the most important man in the brigade. He is the general on the front lines of this flavor war. Historians still argue whether the great sauce-making revolution of the 18th century was a natural culinary evolution, or if it was directly sparked by the sudden introduction of powerful new flavors like this mustard, which forced chefs to abandon their old methods and innovate out of sheer necessity. As you watch the flurry of activity in these kitchens, the answer seems clear. News of Dubois' success travels quickly, and soon every great chef in Paris is experimenting along the same lines, each trying to create their own signature version of a sophisticated, complex mustard sauce. This is the connecting thread, the beginning of the final, massive transformation. This frantic period of competition is doing more than just creating a few new recipes for a trendy condiment. In their desperate attempts to control this one powerful flavor, the chefs of Paris are accidentally creating a new system, a new philosophy of food. They are learning the principles of balancing fat, acid, and stock. They are codifying methods for creating stable, layered sauces that can be replicated and adapted. The mustard, born from a forgotten song, has forced them to write an entirely new chapter in the book of cooking. The scattered, frantic notes of their experiments are slowly coming together into a symphony, the very foundation of modern French cuisine. The culinary arms race in Paris begins to cool, not because the fire is gone, but because it has been harnessed. The frantic, chaotic energy of experimentation gives way to a new, confident order. The chefs, having cracked the code, now begin to codify it. The successful experiments are no longer happy accidents. They are repeatable, teachable formulas. Recipes are written down, not with the vague poetry of the songbook's margin, but with the cool precision of a scientific text. Apprentices are taught not just to cook, but to understand the fundamental principles of flavor balance. This, right here, is the birth of haute cuisine, high cooking. It's a philosophy that rests on technique, system, and the transformative power of a perfectly constructed sauce. You can picture our friend Antoine, back in his shop in Dijon. He's probably making a comfortable living now, his mustard business a very respectable, and now very legal, side hustle. He is likely unaware that the crisis his condiment caused in Paris has led to a full-blown revolution. He just knows that Parisian nobles pay an absurd price for his product. Meanwhile, the very songbook that started it all sits on a shelf, its original musical purpose now a footnote to its true, accidental legacy as the catalyst for a whole new way of cooking. This new way is built upon the very concept the chefs discovered while trying to tame Antoine's mustard. It's the idea of mother sauces, or sauces mère, a concept that would be perfected a generation later, but was born in this moment of crisis. The mainstream historical fact is that this period saw the foundation laid for the great families of French sauce. The veloutés, the béchamels, the espagnols. The mustard-based sauces the chefs created were a new branch on this growing tree, but the process of creating them helped establish the system itself. They learned that a few foundational sauces, when perfectly mastered, could be endlessly adapted to create hundreds of sauce.
Daughter sauces. Remember that messy scribbled note from Section 3? That forgotten recipe, a ghost on a page, has become the unwritten constitution for a new culinary empire. A quirky tidbit from this time is that despite this growing systemization, chefs remained intensely secretive. A prized recipe for a particular sauce was guarded like a state secret, often passed down orally only to a trusted sous chef. The idea of publishing your secrets for all the world to see was still seen as madness, and so the great butterfly effect is complete. A bored corps master in a provincial town finds a dusty book. The book's true value isn't its music, but a tiny handwritten recipe in its margin. That recipe is recreated by a curious printer, and the resulting condiment, through a chance encounter with a nobleman, becomes a fad in the capital. The fad creates a crisis for the nation's top chefs, forcing them to abandon their old ways and, in a fit of competitive innovation, invent a new, systematic sauce-based approach to cooking. That system becomes French haute cuisine, the global standard for fine dining for the next 2 centuries. Historians still argue whether France's global culinary reputation was built on its native ingredients or on this systematic, almost architectural approach to sauce making that could transform any ingredient into a masterpiece. The truth is, it was the latter, an accidental revolution sparked by a song that no one could sing. And so, the frantic energy of the Parisian kitchens begins to soften, the clatter of copper pots and the shouts of the chefs fading into a gentle, distant hum. The story, which began in the dusty silence of a church loft, comes to a quiet close. It's a strange and winding path, isn't it? How a moment of simple boredom for one man could, through such an unlikely chain of events, end up defining the very meaning of fancy food for the entire world. All the grand banquets, the celebrated restaurants, the Michelin stars, all of it, in some small, strange way, connected back to that one forgotten book. It's a quiet reminder that the largest and most lasting movements in history often begin not with a roar, but with a single, curious thought in a quiet room. The grand tapestry of our world is woven from such tiny, invisible threads. Now, let those threads gently unravel. Let the images of powdered wigs and glittering dining halls dissolve into the comfortable darkness around you. There are no more problems to solve, no more sauces to invent. There is only the stillness of this moment, the softness of your pillow, and the gentle pull of a well-deserved rest. Allow the story to drift away.
and let your own dreams quietly take its place.